public comment. We do have a slide across the screen on how to make public comment, and we look forward to your opportunity to do that. The first order of business is a roll call.
Okay. Supervisor Madrone,
Here.
Mayor Jones,
Here.
Mayor Seaman,
Here.
Mayor Hindley,
Here.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar, Councilmember Gordon Johnson,
Here.
Councilmember West,
Here.
Chair Johnson,
Here,
Councilmember Arroyo. I see she's logging on. Mr. Robertson.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
I'm here.
thank you. Our first order of business is to adjourn as the HCOG board, and we will reconvene as the Policy Advisory Committee. And our first order of business under the Policy Advisory Committee is public participation, which is reserved for items not on the agenda that the public wishes to make comment on. And do we have any public comment?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. At that, we will look for approval of the meeting record of February 18th.
Mayor
move-
Jones so approves.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We get a roll call.
Supervisor Madrone,
Yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Mayor Seaman,
Yes.
Mayor Hindley,
Yes.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember Gordon Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
Chair Johnson,
Yes,
Councilmember Arroyo,
Yes.
Mr. Robertson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
and thank you. And we move to the consent calendar. At this time, item C has been removed from the consent calendar for some revision to some language in the resolution. But we have items A, B, and D to be approved. Does anybody wish to pull anything? At that, we'll entertain a motion.
I move we approve the consent calendar minus item number C as submitted.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call?
Supervisor Madrone,
Yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Mayor Seaman,
Yes.
Mayor Hindley,
Yes.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember Gordon Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
Chair Johnson,
Yes,
Councilmember Arroyo,
Yes.
Mr. Robertson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
and thank you. We are now at PAC action items. First order of business is a consultant selection for the Regional Transportation Plan, Variety, and Rural Options of Mobility.
Excuse me, Chair Johnson. We do have the item that was pulled from the consent calendar.
Oh, was the language already revised?
I think there was a staff report on that.
I can give the staff report on that.
Okay,
Yeah, so this is regarding the Low Carbon Transit Operations Program, otherwise known as LC TOP. And we took this to the, I think it was to the TAC or the SS TAC at the last meeting. And the motion at that time was to basically give all the money to Arcata so that they could put it towards the purchase of an electric bus. So that was what the resolution you received had. There is a revision to that request. Arcata had originally asked for retaining some of that money for free bus pass program. And they clarified after the SS TAC meeting that they, rather than sending it all towards the electric bus, they did still want to run that free bus pass program. So the revised resolution would have under the 99313 funds, $10,000 towards the free and reduced fare bus program. And under the 99314 program, there would be $1,531 put towards the free and reduced fare bus program for the Arcata Mad River Transit. And that's the only change. Everything else still goes to the electric bus. So we just wanted to make sure it was clear that that's what the resolution would be making this evening.
Okay, I was not aware that it was ready to go for this portion, so I
No
apologize for that. So
No problem.
so at that, we will entertain a motion on the revised consent calendar item C.
I would move approval of the revised consent calendar C.
Second.
All right, well, we have a motion and a second. A roll call.
Supervisor Madrone,
Yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Mayor Seaman,
Yes.
Mayor Hindley,
Yes.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
Chair Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Oriole,
Yes.
Mr. Robertson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
And Chair, I need to recuse myself on this next item. I don't know if you want to introduce it first and then have me recuse myself, but one of the entities is my employer.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. And you can recuse yourself as at the time of the vote.
Okay.
And also discussion, obviously. Okay, so coming back to PAC item 7A, and do we have a staff report for the consultant selection for the regional transportation plan?
Yes, I'll be giving the staff report this afternoon. So HCOG received funding in the amount of $98,000 from a Caltrans grant, specifically for the purpose of assisting with public outreach and environmental review for the regional transportation plan update that we're working on. So this money is not coming out of the regular budget, but is entirely grant funded. We circulated an RFP for this work and received 2 proposals. And 3 staff members reviewed the proposals independently and unanimously recommended that Plan West Partners, who is teamed with our CAA, be selected for this work. And as it's stated in the staff report, the things that really stood out to us as we were reviewing the proposals were that this team really has vast public outreach experience locally, and also, generally speaking, but also specific to active transportation planning. And they really demonstrated their ability to leverage their existing relationships to help us reach communities that we may not have been able to reach in the past in terms of other RTP updates. They had a really good plan for both in-person COVID compliant events and virtual meetings, which really kind of indicated to us that they acknowledged the digital divide and really thought through, how we could reach the largest population in our community. And they had a meaningful plan for social media and virtual engagements. So those were really the things that stood out to us as we reviewed it, and why we were recommending that the board or the PAC authorize the executive director to negotiate with the Plan West and our CAA team for this contract.
Thank you. And at that, does anyone on the board or the PAC have a comment or question?
I have a question for Beth. This is Jesse Robertson. is there any requirement that you get at least 3 bids on a proposal like this? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Not that I'm aware of. We can look into that. I think, we publish this in all the regular channels. I think if we were to republish it, I'm not sure that we would get more than these 2 responses. I think we're okay there, but I can certainly look into that further and make sure we don't have any issues with that. We really, don't have a lot of time on this. We're trying to get the RTP update adopted by the end of this calendar year. So I'd be pushing really hard to make sure that, we can make the selection out of the bids we received so far. But I will double check on that before we enter into contract. Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, you may need to get an approval for receiving less than 3 bids. That might require something like a solicitation of people that received the request for proposals but didn't submit a bid. See, if you were to send it back out, would there be a chance that they would try, put in a proposal in the with the modifications. So anyway, before I would something like that, I'd just like to make sure that I'm not, encouraging any breach, that might be subject to like your master fund transfer agreement. So
yeah, thank you. We will double check on that. I should mention we did receive a third, it wasn't a proposal, but a letter from a third firm that basically said they were happy to receive the request for proposals, but they didn't have capacity to deliver and they wouldn't be proposing. So I'm not sure if that's helping our case here, but I'll certainly look into that.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe, I would maybe qualify my vote, pending the certification that, that selecting among only 2 bidders is adequate. I would approve the recommendations of HCOG staff.
Great, thank you.
Okay, is there any other comment or discussion? Well, hearing none, entertain a motion.
I would move, Mayor Jones would move that the PAC recommends that the HCOG board authorize the executive director to negotiate and award the contract with Plan West Partners for the Regional Transportation Plan, also known as the Variety and Rural Options of Mobility, or VROOM, for the updated assistance for the fiscal year 2021-22.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And Beth, do you think we need to add language regarding pending research or approval in the grantor's requirements?
It probably wouldn't hurt. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I have a question. Did you just receive that letter back in one thing, or did you send it out to multiple and didn't receive any replies back?
We send it out to the entire mailing list that we have as our normal distribution for all.
Then you shouldn't need it. They decided not to apply. You gave them the offer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think we could go either way. I will certainly double check before I start my negotiations to make sure we're clear on that. So if the person making the motion wants to add it in, that's fine. I don't know that it's entirely required, but I'd leave that up to the maker of the motion.
Well, I made the motion and I don't mind amending it to state in view of the fact that we might need to amend it that pending approval of the process of getting the bids. Mm-hmm. So I would be willing to amend that motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call?
Okay, Supervisor Madrone,
Yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Mayor Seaman,
Yes.
Mayor Hindley,
Yes.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember Gordon Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
Chair Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Robertson.
Yes.
Okay, and we have Councilmember Arroyo as recused, and the motion passes.
Thank you. Our next item is the Regional Transportation Plan update, organization, and greenhouse gas emissions reduction and targets. And I will introduce this a little bit before we hand it off to Una for more discussion. But this is a process that we entered into, I believe, in November. And we formed an ad hoc committee consisting of, that time, Michael Winkler, council member from, actually, I think he was mayor of Arcata, Mayor Seaman, myself, Kevin Tucker from Caltrans, and we had public participation with various public and members and advocacy groups. And it was a very in-depth look at measures and metrics of how greenhouse gas can be reduced, and also improvements in bicycle, ped, and transit, things that we can do to lower the greenhouse gas emissions. And it was a look into it affects all areas of our transportation system, as well as public agencies, public agency fleets, including equipment as well as vehicles. And it was a process involving much deliberation, and also included the technical advisory committees. And it was a learning experience for myself and others. And we did not enter into it lightly, but looked at it realistically. And as the plan, what you will see presented and what you hopefully have had an opportunity to look at and to read over and digest is important. And at that, I will ask if Mayor Seaman has any comments before we turn it over to Una for the staff report.
No, the only thing I'll really say is, this is what I was telling Councilmember Johnson before we started, is that he came in with a vast amount of knowledge about stuff like this, and I came in as the novice. So my perspective was that of somebody who might be looking at this from the community, who's never been exposed to something like this, because I was asking the kinds of questions they would, and used it mostly as a learning experience myself. So it was an interesting process and painstaking, and I am so impressed with Una and her ability to follow everybody's comments. So that's my comment.
Thank you. And realistically, it would not have been possible without Una's participation and ability to move throughout the various, from public comments to the technical advisory committee and the ad hoc committee, and to take the information and digest it and put it in a readable form that can be handed out for other people to look at. And with that, I will turn it over to Una for her portion and presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Seaman and Chair Johnson. So, very flattered. Thank you. I'm really happy that the board decided months ago to form this ad hoc committee and put real time and effort towards this important and challenging work. A little bit of the context for those who weren't on the board when this did sprout. HCOG was presenting actually our overall work program to the board. And for a couple of years now, we've had a work element to work on sea level rise and greenhouse gas. But we didn't have very many specific ideas about how to go about that. So our tasks were mostly partnering, research, learning, looking at mitigation measures. And we got feedback from the community that it was time to put things in the regional transportation plan, not just the OWP, and really start thinking about what are our long-term objectives to address the climate crisis. So the board decided to have an ad hoc committee. The ad hoc committee worked very diligently and also was very open to public participation in an ad hoc committee. So that was very reassuring and I think very satisfying. So on to the table, I will just give one update that at the state level, the California State Transportation Agency, which goes by the agency, or CalSTA, they just came out with their draft of the climate action plan for transportation infrastructure. And that one I've heard described as ambitious. And our greenhouse gas targets have also been described as ambitious. So we're right there with the state. I think we're following the right course. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is just bring up the table to review the main targets that we have and refresh your memories of those, but I will not go through each regional target. So the first one that's listed, and they are listed in no particular order. The first one, performance measure, would be to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in our air district. And just a little note on that, that it is short because we find that it's hard for one air district to, one, figure out how to count vehicle miles traveled in a confident way. And it's also hard to count emissions. So anyway, we have that one metric of transportation fuel cells to get towards that. Then the next one is percent mode shift. And with the general goal of getting more modes, getting more people to bike and walk and take public transit in lieu of driving, especially in lieu of single vehicle occupant trips. And then there's that next one, to reduce vehicle miles traveled by car. And then another theme is zero emission vehicle infrastructure. So this touches upon everything we're going to need in the public, private, and residential sectors to basically meet the goals of going electric and zero emission in our transportation vehicles. And parallel with that, and that's a long one, is a move to up the percentage of zero emission school buses and public fleet vehicles. And a lot of this comes straight from a governor's executive order. And that's listed under the Innovative Clean Transit Regulation. So this is us just putting in our plan our targets for meeting state mandates. And I believe we have 2 or 3 more. Then this is a big one, efficiency and practicality in locating new housing. So this addresses the kinds of integration and smart planning for the future, and also, I guess, maybe retrofitting, if that's the correct word, in how we have our transportation services and transportation opportunities integrated in where we live, where we work, where we go to school, where we socialize, recreate, and do other necessary social and health things in our day-to-day lives. That's also tied with convenient access to destinations. That very much the way we approached that was convenient access to destinations was talking about land use and how people could get to most of their destinations without having to drive in a car. And then Vision Zero is being part of the national and global movement to make transportation safer, to bring down to zero the number of people who are killed when they're walking or riding a bike or driving a car. So basically no more fatalities in our roads and trails. And then active transportation education would be everything from going into the classroom to teach bicycling and walking safety, and just promoting it in a way that maintains children's excitement in that kind of activity, and also to promote it in adults, and also to promote safe driving and all that kinds of stuff. And then the last one in the table is directed towards how we channel our funding, so investing in complete streets. And this is a goal to target by percentages how much we increase regional discretionary funding for building our complete streets. So I'll scroll back up to the top just to kind of refresh to start, and open it up for questions and comments.
Does any any of the board members, or I should say PAC members, have any questions or comments?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I don't know if you can see everyone since the screen shares on. I am curious. It was a little unclear to me in reading the staff report and the attachments. I see that there is some additional information about the 20, this seems to be essentially one of the elements for the 2017 regional transportation plan. But given that we're right around the corner from embarking on the next phase, I just was curious about how this fits into there. Like, how will it be rolled into the upcoming plan? And I mean, I think the time is now to do this. I'm just curious about how it kind of dovetails with that other effort.
So the current RTP has a element or a chapter called Global Climate Crisis, which is really mostly a summary of existing conditions and then policies in broad terms about what kinds of goals and objectives HCOG has to reduce transportation related emissions. So what we're proposing to do in the update is have these targets. We don't have any kinds of targets like these at all in the current RTP. We do have performance measures in every element of the RTP, but at our level of population and being a regional transportation planning agency as opposed to a metropolitan, we get a pass on monitoring all of our performance measures because the data is so hard to come by. So we do have performance measures now, but these kinds of performance measures we do not have in the current RTP. So these ones that are all very much focused on changing tailpipe emissions, that's new too. So the way we're proposing to wrap it in, which is the next part of this agenda item, is that we are proposing to reorganize the RTP a little bit. And this table would be plopped in. I can't remember right now which way I reorganized it, but our global climate crisis element is probably going to be expanded more into a narrative about what kind of quality of place we're trying to get to. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, I was just, it seemed like this is like on the, I think the time is now to be doing this, so it's great, but I just didn't know how this will be incorporated into the next RTP. And, but I hear you about the data being hard to come by and this being sort of an additional item that folks worked hard to create. Yeah, I just didn't really understand how it fits. And that, since that, I assume that outreach effort is going to begin and be robust. I just didn't understand how this was going to plug in per se. So that your answer helps me.
Okay, well, let me just, for a quick second, if I find my staff report. I have a proposed place to put it under. So after renewing our communities, we would have a section for goals and visions. So that would describe the vision and the primary objectives, and then our greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
And
Okay,
oh,
I have
go
a
ahead.
question.
Yes, Mayor Jones.
Yeah, okay, so I see in your staff report that you said you're providing a long-term 20-year visioning framework. And I'm curious to know, since we haven't been able to get a census figure on 2020 as to our population in Humboldt County, I'm just curious to know if that was considered by the committee as to our population either growing or shrinking. I'm not sure what the stats are going to be on that. If you have any information on that, that would be helpful too. But was that considered when you looked into your goals, your short-term and long-term?
And thinking of the, just kind of like the overall goals of what the greenhouse gas targets are trying to get to. I would say, I can't speak for the other people on the committee or the public commenters, but in general, I was going on basically a historical trajectory of the last decade or two, and then also in alignment with what our regional housing needs assessment from the state has guesstimated or estimated, I should say, is our population. So I didn't crunch any numbers, and I didn't assume that we would have a huge uptake in our population. But what we also kept in mind is that we're not going to have our baseline until after this RTP is approved, which would be the end of this year. Then we would start getting the best baseline we could, but we would also have to deliberate on what is the baseline, considering that 2020 we were under a global pandemic. So we know we have work to do in the future on that. And we'll also make sure that our projections make sense with the states. And if the states' projections don't make sense, then we have dialogue with those entities.
And when you talked about the housing element, are you talking about the projection of how many houses our communities have to provide? Because all of us were given, that baseline of what the governor had started to say per city, how many houses we were supposed to were supposed to have. I don't know if it was a 10-year projection. I can't recall that, but I know that there was certain amount of housing each city was supposed to come up with. And so I'm assuming that you got that. Is that what you used as your information, the projected amount of housing that each city will be required to have?
That is what we will keep in mind, and the population projections that those housing numbers were based on. Yes,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
One
Yeah, Mr.
comment.
Chair,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, this is Supervisor Madrone. First of all, excellent work, Una, and all of those that worked on these. On that first one, the air emissions reductions, that's such an excellent one. I was just thinking about a different metric. Back when we first started the Bay Trail project, the very first feasibility analysis grant that was funded was from the Air Quality District. That was a grant to reduce air emissions. And so they funded the very first grant for the Bay Trail to look at various alternative routes. And I was just thinking that commuter trail use might be a nice metric to use for air emission reductions. In trails that go between cities, they're mostly commuter, although clearly recreational as well. But that just might be another metric that we could use there, increased trail use.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question.
Go ahead.
A lot of the roads in Humboldt County, especially the county roads, are in pretty poor shape, and there are a lot of people using them. How are you going to bring in the county roads and make sure they're usable for bicycles and pedestrians and make them safe and upgrade them?
That's a great question. We won't do it alone. Absolutely won't. So what the RTP will try and do in these coming months is get consensus from the community and technical advisory committee members and on what is the best way for us to prioritize to meet all these objectives. And so beyond that discussion of how we prioritize it, really what roads the county brings forward for funding is up to the county. And we definitely work with them to figure out, well, what's the best, way to get input from the community and try and figure out who's most in need, and which roads hit the most or have the potential to hit most of our performance targets. I would think it would slant that way.
Okay, would you like people to be getting that information to the supervisors so they know some of the roads that are the worst ones that we know about?
Yeah, and in fact, this year, one of the methods for educating ourselves about that is the pavement condition index, which HCOG updates every 2 or 4 years, I'm not sure, but we're required to do that also in lines with some of our funding pots. So that is one method. Consultants actually go out and look at all the roads and then give a percentage that can be translated into a letter grade. So that's one way. And then at the internal knowledge part from the county, they would have to tell us from what they've heard from residents and neighbors and such, what is used most and failing, and what is, of course, basically, if a road's failing but no one uses it, then that would be a lower priority.
Well, one of the things I'd like you to tell them is that they should look very carefully at the shoulders where people are riding bikes and walking. Make sure it's not just the main road, because a lot of the roads are okay, but the shoulders are so bad, they're dangerous.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak to this? And how about, do we have any public comment pending, Christy?
Yes, we have one, last four numbers, 5603.
Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. This is Colin Fisk. Good afternoon. I'm the Executive Director of the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities. And I wanted to first express my appreciation to Chair Johnson and Mayor Seaman, as well as former Mayor Winkler and Kevin Tucker for serving on the ad hoc committee that produced the proposed RTP targets that you're reviewing. And also, of course, to Senior Planner Una Smith for coordinating that committee and doing so much support work. This committee functioned in a remarkably open and transparent way, taking active input from members of the public throughout, and those open discussions led to a set of proposed targets that I think are appropriately ambitious but achievable, and that are commensurate with the challenges that we face related to our climate, as well as our safety and our society and economy. This is, I think we should look at it as an interlocking and mutually reinforcing set of targets for reducing vehicle miles traveled and climate harming emissions, as well as increasing active transportation and transit, electrifying vehicles, improving land use practices, and increasing safety. Of course, as Una mentioned earlier, HCOG wouldn't be able to accomplish all this on its own. It'll require close coordination with all of the member jurisdictions and agencies, and that will be a challenge, but a necessary one, and one that I think we can meet. So I would encourage you to approve the draft targets, to go ahead and with the process of taking more public input on the RTP, and then incorporate them into that upcoming RTP update. As Una and Councilmember Arroyo briefly discussed earlier, the next step is designing that RTP update around these targets in a way that helps us achieve them. That means that from my perspective, it should contain only projects that actually move us toward and not away from these collective regional goals, which will require us to make some tough choices. It also means that the plan should be organized around issues of climate, safety, and equity, which these targets largely already are. If we do that and we hold ourselves accountable to the plan moving forward, I think we can achieve a truly successful transportation system here in Humboldt. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any others, or Debbie would like to read some into the record?
I do have 6 comments that we received that I can read into the record. The first go ahead.
I was going to say thank you.
Okay, so the first comment reads as follows. Dear HCOG, I am writing to express my support for the bold targets laid out in the Regional Transportation Plan update referenced in Agenda Item 7B. We can all agree that we are facing a climate crisis that requires immediate collective action. The strong targets set in the RTP are essential for meeting our climate challenges, and the committee has done a great job developing these targets. It is essential that we strive to meet these goals and that we hold climate, safety, and equity as the core principles of all projects moving forward. These targets will not only improve bicycle and pedestrian safety and contribute to solving the climate crisis, they will also have a near-term health benefit. By increasing active transportation, we can reduce rates of obesity and health impacts related to obesities, such as diabetes, hypertension, and cardiovascular disease. Through this work, we will add to the quality of life and extend the life expectancy of Humboldt County residents. Thank you for your time and attention to this urgent matter, submitted by Robin Baker. Comment number 2. The Regional Transportation Plan appears to have well-articulated strong performance measures and targets, but we also need realistic ways to meet these targets. The plan update could be narrowed to include only projects that move us toward meeting the targets. My personal concern as a walker are primarily about safety. I walk for health and to decrease my carbon footprint. The plan update cannot overlook the climate crisis or the alarming increase in pedestrian deaths and injuries, particularly in Eureka. I am very excited about a better bicycle and pedestrian network. I am also very excited about reducing vehicle miles traveled by car and truck, but alternatives that take into consideration the comfort and convenience of travelers have not been forthcoming. In order for people to actually use transportation, it needs to be regularly scheduled at convenient times, including evenings. It is neither comfortable nor convenient to find that one has to stay overnight in Eureka because the last bus has left and is not even when it is not even dark yet. It is extremely important for the rural populace to have transportation alternatives to cars and trucks, gasoline powered, hybrid, or electric. More consistent and regular bus service could also decrease incidences of folks driving under the influence of substances or cell phones. Submitted by Carol Monet. Number 3, I am writing on behalf of Humboldt Baykeeper in support of setting strong targets for reducing vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions in the Regional Transportation Plan. Our region is facing twice the rate of sea level rise as the rest of the state, and it is critical that we do our part to slow the rate of climate change and sea level rise. The proposed targets and performance measures will further these goals and will increase active transportation, public safety, and promote projects that benefit the entire community and environment. Climate safety and equity should be the organizing principles of the Regional Transportation Plan. Submitted by Carol Colt, Director of the Humboldt Baykeeper. Comment number 4. I support the detailed, well thought out proposed regional transportation plan. As board members, you have the incredible opportunity to rally behind this plan and to contribute significantly to Humboldt County's need to reduce greenhouse gas emission. The transportation sector is responsible for over half of the county's greenhouse gas emissions. While being leaders in combating this reality and transitioning away from the existing norms is challenging, it also must be exciting to be in a position to help move us to a more sustainable and healthy future. Submitted by Nancy Ihara. Comment number 5. I'd like to submit a public comment in support of the targets and goals proposed in the Regional Transportation Plan. We are facing both a climate crisis and a transportation safety crisis. Bold targets are needed to meet these challenges, and the committee has done a good job of developing these targets. Climate, safety, and equity should be the organizing principles of the Regional Transportation Plan. Submitted by Lissy Rids. The final comment. Thank you for the ambitious Regional Transportation Plan with its strong priority of reducing emissions. The variety of strategies for achieving reduced emissions always allows pragmatism in a community that includes a lot of rural areas in addition to urban. I hope projects will soon follow to achieve the most achievable goals, such as increased bike lanes and trails and a more serviceable mass transit system. It's also exciting to work towards a future that includes concepts such as the 20-minute neighborhood. Many large cities all over the world, such as Portland, Oregon, and Melbourne, Australia, are utilizing this concept. Rethinking and revamping transportation is crucial for curbing the unfolding climate emergency. Thank you for embracing your role. Many citizens will hopefully support the projects that implement this plan. Submitted by Martha Walden. And that concludes the public comments that were submitted by email.
Thank you very much for reading those in, and thank you for the folks that sent them in to be considered and entered into the record. At this point, I would just say that it was a learning experience for me and a way of looking at how people look at things. Some people, this is a wake-up call. Some people have been living with some of these goals for a long time. And I think a large portion of the public falls somewhere in the middle. And at this juncture, we should consider accepting the report and sending it out for public review And I believe that through the whole process, it was, in my mind, a foregone conclusion that it would be entered into the, not just this, but the next regional transportation plan. And I don't know how the board feels about that, but I think that's the juncture we find ourselves at, as well as what we would do with the ad hoc committee, retain it and reactivate it when it comes time for the public to consider the public review comments, and before we move it to the next stage, which would be adoption into the RTP, or to abandon it and then form it at the next juncture. Does anybody have anything to say about that? Well,
Well, the only thought I had, Mr. Johnson, is that in view of the fact that we're elected officials and there is change that occurs, for instance, Mayor Winkler is no longer with us and that kind of thing. I don't know exactly what your timeline is, how quickly you want to move forward. I mean, I think this is a good committee, but already it's going to need some change because there are consequences to elections. So that was the only thought I had, was that you may need to relook at your members if things change in the future.
yeah, that could happen depending on when it comes back from public review. But I think it was a good idea to have it, and regardless, at the next juncture, it allowed less than a quorum of people to look at it and to bring it to this point. But at that point, at the next thing, is it the desire of the board to accept it and to move it to the public review process?
I would make a motion that the board does that we accept this report and that we now send it out for public review. I don't know what form that public review is going to be in terms of getting it out to folks. It sounds like people have already found out about it. But however the committee feels is the best way to get it out to the public.
I'll second that motion.
I have a question on it. What is the public review, and what do you envision as the public review, folks who have been working on this for some time?
Well, it would be, my vision is that it would be something along the lines of a environmental review document where it would get circulated, put up where it can be accessed, and probably have some public meetings. I'm not sure, but that's kind of looking ahead. That's kind of what I see. Perhaps you can speak to that.
Yeah, from staff's basic outline. So the whole RTP is going to be going through public review. We haven't had any formal kickoff of that yet. So my idea would be to fold the table into the chapters where it would make sense, and then package that and put it out for public review. We don't generally wait for the whole RTP to be done. We generally kind of do it in chunks, and as we're ready, feed it to the public to give people more time to digest it. And that's what I would go for this year as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Oh, yes.
Thank you. That's helpful. Just, I'm thinking about some of the comments that were made and some of the elements of this that pertain to transit. I mean, I think they're wonderful goals that I fully support. And, I know that HTA is really moving in the direction of zero emission vehicles and, hydrogen as a potential fuel source, and some other pretty awesome upgrades to the system. And just thinking about desires for more service, I would just encourage everyone who's part of the community throughout this process and who really wants to see that to be in communication with HTA, especially our general manager, to really well, maybe not, whatever opportunities there are to involve HTA in the conversation about what's really feasible is incredibly helpful. It's been a tough time for transit during the pandemic. And it seems that every time we talk about service levels, people would like more service and later hours, but the ridership just hasn't been there when those expanded services and destinations have been offered. So it's very challenging to add new service. And then, in the last couple of years, we've had some real challenges with a few new stops and new routes. So I'm certainly excited about the prospect of doing that. And I know that there's a lot of public desire for it. I just hope that we are really intimately involved in that portion of the planning. And I look forward to being part of it. So whenever I hear a wish for more service, I think about how much it really needs to be including the potential riders in, and lots of them, not just a few potential riders. We need a lot of potential riders to be on board with that, literally on board. Because without that, it's extremely difficult to make those kinds of decisions for our board. So I would encourage folks to reach out to us, to me, to our general manager, and communicate that as much as possible. It's a struggle. I mean, we have such a huge county, and greenhouse gas reduction here is just, it looks different from in large urban areas that folks bring up as and sort of highlight as these ideals. And so those are my thoughts on that. And I look forward to talking more about how transit can be part of the picture.
Okay.
If I may, Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Councilmember Arroyo, for that. I appreciate and am definitely conscientious of the role that transit can play, but the challenges. And just to update the board that at the Technical Advisory Committee meeting, members posed questions directly to General Manager Greg Pratt because they were also very conscientious and asked him if those goals were too aspirational and did they cause him concern. And the general manager's response was he was not concerned. He liked having those kinds of goals in regional plan because it helped him make the case when he's looking for funding and when he's talking to policymakers that this is what's desired in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we've come back around to we have a motion, and I believe we had a second to accept the report and move it to the public review stage. Am I correct in remembering that?
Yes, if I may, through the chair. Oh, we were just looking for direction, though. We don't need a formal motion.
Okay, well, hey.
Well, we appreciate the enthusiasm.
I can remove my motion.
Well, I believe you have direction.
Thank you very much. So that is wonderful direction on the greenhouse gas targets. This staff report also presented a proposed outline, and I'd like to know if there's any qualifiers or concerns about that portion, and I can pull that up and reiterate or review. I'll just show you right here, shows how the plan is organized right now under these 10 elements. Introduction, complete streets, and the complete streets element covers basically how we want to use our streets and roadways. So that's for cars, pedestrians, people pushing strollers, people in wheelchairs, people carrying umbrellas in the rain, and people bicycling, and then also transit bus stops. And then we have commuter trails element. It does not include trails that are recreational in purpose only. Then we have a tribal transportation element, our public transportation element, aviation, goods movement, and then an emergency transportation element, which focuses on, in natural disasters, having evacuation plans in place. And then the required financial element, which discusses where is the funding coming from, how much do we have funding for, and how much of a shortfall will there be in our 5, 10, 20-year plan. And then the last one was the global crisis. I think I might have missed a word in there. Yes, global climate crisis. And then the new outline was proposed as an introductory or executive summary of a sort to initiate people into it. And then 2, under a theme of renewing our communities, we would discuss making streets safer, more useful, and attractive, and addressing the global climate crisis and addressing transportation equity. And then 3 would be our goals and vision, which also would include our performance targets for the table you just approved to go to public review. And then strengthening partnerships, that would be our tribal transportation element, our emergency transportation element, and our land use and transportation. So these are building upon, as it says, partnerships to improve everything transportation related with other agencies in the region. And then supporting active communities would be where we would have our complete streets and connected networks / neighborhoods, our commuter trails, and our public transportation elements. And then 6, commercial and industrial transport, being our aviation system and goods movement. Those 2 elements are required in the RTP, whether HCOG actually has funding for that, which we don't generally. That is other jurisdictions' responsibilities. And then 7, the required financial element. And there will probably be another chapter that would summarize our public review process and our public outreach and the partnerships that we have fomented during this process. So I am happy to hear any feedback on an organization such as that.
That appears to be pretty well organized and thought out. Does anybody have any comments on that portion of it? No. Hearing none, I will assume that that's an affirmative. And again, I think we've all spoken and given direction, and in some aspects, we can see portions of this being enacted as they work on the South Broadway element of the Complete Streets project through there, where we're providing better pedestrian and bicycle facilities, as well as safety measures to enhance the pedestrian facilities to make it more comfortable for people to use them. So looking at that, we can see a portion, a step in the right direction. Anybody else before we hand this off? Okay, I think you've got direction.
Thank you very much for the direction.
And thank you for your hard work on this. It was a labor, but a well thought out and well organized job you did. So thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to work with the ad hoc committee.
Okay, with that, we can reconvene as the HCOG board and by motion reconvene and approve the PAC recommendations.
I'll move that we reconvene and approve the PAC recommendations.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We have a roll call.
Supervisor Madrone,
Yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Mayor Seaman,
Yes.
Mayor Hindley,
Yes.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember Gordon Johnson, Councilmember West,
Yes.
Chair Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right, thank you. And with that, we'll move to the reports for the 101 corridor, the last chance grade, and the complete streets South Broadway project. And finally, the 101 safety corridor supplemental patrols.
Sure. This is Jesse Robertson. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have two updates, one from Jamie Mattioli on the last chance grade and another one from Jeff Pimentel on the Eureka Arcata corridor. I don't have an update on the South Broadway project at this point, but we can keep you up to date at future meetings as more information comes down the pipeline. So for the last chance grade, the project, the environmental process remains on schedule and on budget. We've had success in late 2020 and early 2021 installing geotechnical instruments, and we continue to collect and monitor data that will serve the preliminary design of the project alternatives. Related to the alternative screening, we're engaged with our stakeholders to narrow down the list of alternatives so we can save time, money, and reduce risk by selecting only those most viable and feasible to fully study. There will be some alternatives that are considered and eliminated, working closely with 4 working groups to inform our decisions: tribes, local government officials, partner agencies, non-governmental organizations, businesses, and others. HCOG Representative Gordon Johnson attended the second round of these meetings, which were held the week of March 1st. The final working group meeting on alternatives screening is to be determined and likely to occur in late April. So the project team is planning a scoping meeting this summer. The public can review and comment on the list of alternatives moving forward for full studies continuing through this year. So if there's any questions you have that you'd like to see addressed at any of the future meetings, let me know, and I can work with the project managers if they're able to attend these meetings to make sure that you guys get the information that you want. So if there's no other questions, I can give you a brief update also from Jeff Pimentel, the project manager for the Eureka Arcata corridor. Are there any questions?
Don't see any.
Hearing none. Okay. So Jeff tells us that the project development team is expecting to complete the delivery of the project no later than 3/22/21. I noticed in the meeting notes that we said earlier, maybe March 5th, but now we're looking at March 22nd of this year. The engineer's estimates for the project are slightly under what was programmed, the program funds for the project. So that is a positive trend. Caltrans District 1 will be submitting the construction fund allocation request on March 22nd in order to be placed on the May California Transportation Commission agenda. So if there's any questions on that project too, I can pass those along, and we can make sure that the board gets any information that they would like more detail on. So that's all I have at this point.
I think one question that had come up before, and I don't know that we got any closure on it, was the return of funds to us. here in the district. And that was supposed to go to the CTC earlier. I think it was actually in 2020. And then I believe it got pushed out into 21. I was just wondering if that had gone yet.
I haven't heard, so I will look into it, and I can bring this back next week, or maybe we can even send an email out. We'll have to see if that if that's consistent with the Brown Act or HCOG policies. So, but yeah, we can. I'll take a look at that. I do remember that a discussion item coming up in previous meetings. So, I'll ask about that and try to get that information to you.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any other questions for Mr. Robertson? Seeing none, thank you for that report, and we appreciate what you've done. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we can move to the supplemental patrols on the 101 corridor.
Yes, I can give an update on that. We have 2 months worth of stats to report because we didn't have January's stats in time for last month's meeting. So in January, there were 54 stops made with 18 citations and 36 warnings and 8 arrests. The worst of the worst last month was a 52-year-old woman from Stockton who was, worst of the worst in January, 52-year-old woman from Stockton who was cited for going 73 miles per hour in the safety corridor. That is very fast. February statistics, 34 traffic stops, citations. There were 18 citations, 16 warnings, no arrests. And the worst of the worst in February was a 31-year-old man from Eureka going 74 miles per hour. So that concludes this update. Yeah, that would be flying by on the safety corridor. That's
yeah.
fast.
Well, low flying ducks, huh? Thank you very much for that. Is there any other comments or items of discussion before we adjourn? Seeing none, I know there's one person who's happy to have some little time to go see her husband. So
I don't get to see him, but I'm sorry I left the meeting. I did warn folks. My husband had been in surgery for 9 hours, and I got the call while we were in the meeting. So that was why I disappeared. I had to text everybody and say, he's okay. Yay. So.
Good. Thank you for that. We appreciate your concern and are glad that things came out well. And with that, unless there's another item, we will be adjourned. Thank you.
See you at the next meeting.
Everybody. Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye.